Hello to everyone. It really is a great pleasure to be with you all. Our theme of emotional intelligence is very, very relevant because our emotions cause all sorts of different states of mind. Is it that our emotions cause states of mind? Or is it that our thoughts give rise to emotions? Now, there's something straight away to think about. Actually, you will notice that there's a very, very deep connection between the two. A thought arises, a memory arises, and it can trigger deep emotions. Unfortunately, they're often deep hurts, deep negative emotions, or fears, or something of traumas we've been through, big or little. It's incredible how much we have stored inside of us that can come out at any time. And of course, when people have really acute problems, they do need, of course, professional help. But for many of us, understanding more deeply emotional intelligence, understanding how to deal with our minds, can really help us on a day-to-day basis to navigate through life better, to be happier, to have good relationships, and to be more content within ourselves. And we know that in today's world, in today's society, there's still so much uncertainty, a lot of fear about the pandemic. Although I do see people going about their business more and more and feeling a little more free. And I think that's a good thing. Of course, we have to be cautious. But there's a secret here that if I'm happy, then that actually boosts my immune system. And if I'm fearful and in a negative state of mind, and this is common knowledge, it actually makes my immune system more vulnerable to disease. So that's something to think about. So it's benefit on all levels if I can adopt some emotional intelligence in my life, which means being able to handle my emotions and to work with them. And of course, we all have been through so many experiences. And as we go through experiences in life, those experiences get stored on the consciousness and some go into the subconscious. So we have stored many, many things in our lives. Many of them we're not even aware of. It's like the being within, the consciousness is like a sponge that can sponge up, that can soak up so many things. But of course, with emotional intelligence, I want to begin to become the master of my emotions. So that means that I want to come to a point where I can begin to choose what it is that I soak up and what it is that I allow in. Now, wouldn't that be helpful? I had a situation just, I think, 2 or 3 days ago, and something happened. And it didn't happen to me in a way. It was something someone did in a situation. But it triggered a deep old hurt in me. And it was like I was overwhelmed by my emotions. And of course, I'm one of those people that, if something's going on inside, it shows on my face. I can't hide it, no matter how much I try. Just impossible. So people, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. You know how that is. Until I was able to speak to the person, deal with it. And then, how when you deal with something, suddenly from being a big thing, it becomes a little thing. Well, why did I get into such a stew about that? It really wasn't worth it. And yet when those emotions come up, it's like you're helpless. You just don't know what to do. So, of course, the thing is to work with my emotions and my mind in such a way that I'm able to see those trigger points and not allow things to overwhelm me, but to be able to steer my way through life in a very conscious way. So I've been practicing a lot on different levels, but of course, sometimes things just come, as they did a few days ago. And of course, when there are good emotions, it's a funny thing in the human psyche. When we remember the past, we more remember the things that hurt us, the negative things, rather than remembering all the good things. Of course, many times we do. And when you sit to consciously remember all the good things that have happened to you in your life, and you bring up the emotion or the feeling of being grateful for those good things, it really, really uplifts the spirit a lot. You really begin to feel very, very different. It's so important to remember good things. And, someone was saying to me recently, when somebody leaves, somebody passes on, at that time you get to know all about the person and all their good things. Well, we need to do that before, don't we? So remembering good things helps us uplift the spirit. But too often when we remember the past, it's the hurts and it's the negative emotions that come to the fore. And I sometimes give this example, imagine if you went to a party and, oh, it was lovely. You enjoyed being with people. It was such a nice experience. And then before you left, you dropped a glass of juice or a glass of wine. Well, I don't drink wine. Could be wine, could be juice. You drop something over somebody. Oh, don't you feel mortified at that moment, especially if it's somebody you don't know? And so you try to mop it up, you apologize, you feel foolish, all of those things. Okay, the other person says, all right, don't worry. You leave that party. The next day, if somebody said to you, did you have a good party? What would you say? Oh, it was awful. This is what I did. So you forget the 90%, or even the 99%, and remember the 1%. And that's what seems to happen. And sometimes I know people do this exercise if they show you a piece of paper and they put a dot in the middle and can be any color. And they say, what do you see on that paper? And the person would describe the dot, its color, its shape, whatever. And then the other person would say, well, look, 99% of the paper's blank. You didn't notice that? So somehow we have this habit of zooming into our negative emotions. And this is because we allow our negative emotions to create self-doubt, to lessen the way in which we value ourselves, to lessen our self-esteem. So you drop that glass of juice or whatever, and so now you feel yourself a terrible person. Look at the stupid thing you did. So you can see how it works. We begin to put ourselves down, and then that emotion becomes more ingrained and it stays with me, and stays with me. And so then I say, oh dear, what shall I do now? And then there's fear when you come into that situation again. I've taken a very simple example, but there are many examples we could take. And so what do I do about these things? And when there are negative emotions, when I do get deeply hurt, and it happens to all of us, and if those of you who are listening have never been hurt in your life, you are very lucky. But I believe it happens to all of us. This is the world we are in at the moment. And people hurt each other not because they have a bad intention, but because there's so much insecurity around, so much. And so to make yourself feel secure, you want to hit out at another. Interesting dynamic. But let's look at this. I feel hurt by something. So I have a choice with what I can do with that emotion. Sometimes if it's too strong, I just bury it. And sometimes, especially for children, but it can happen in adult life too, we bury our emotions very, very deep. And that's when it goes into our subconscious. And then we don't understand why our moods change at certain times, even though everything seems to be okay on the external level. Why has my mood changed? Why do I suddenly feel sad or anxious? There's no real reason. It's because it's something that I've buried in the subconscious that is coming up. That emotion comes up and I feel it, but I no longer have the memory of what it related to because I've decided to bury it deep inside. And of course, this is not a good thing for the self, because if I have buried negative emotions, they will come out in some way. One will be with negative feelings, and that may cause me to act in a certain way that I don't like. And most of all, it will usually erode my self-respect. But also, it has an impact on my physical health. And so when these negative emotions come up, it's gnawing away at me and it's affecting me, even physically. And of course, I'm spreading that atmosphere around with the people I'm with. So when I feel this, I don't go into a kind of analysis of what happened, or some people do need that, and I absolutely understand that. But often just the understanding that there is something in the subconscious that is powering this, I can, with my very positive thoughts, and particularly taking strength from my real self-awareness and practicing that, and we'll come to that in a moment, and taking strength from God, I can begin to turn around even those deep emotions. Now, as I say, if it's not working and you need more professional help, then absolutely, that's important. But I'm talking on a level that we can deal with. But the other thing that we do with negative emotions, somebody gets angry at me or says something, hurts me, and there's a volcano inside and the lava comes out. So I explode and I get angry in return. I say something, or more likely, I blame the other person for having caused my negative emotion. Why did you speak like that to me? It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, I'd be perfectly happy. All these sorts of things come out, and I begin to criticize. So these negative emotions get expressed. And so I'm hurt, and now the other person's hurt too. Well, it doesn't sound a very productive situation, does it? And especially the whole thing of blame. I really feel, in a way, we live more and more in a blame culture. Everybody's looking for someone to blame for anything and everything. But we need to shift to a culture of appreciation. So that's the other thing, the explosion. But the third way of dealing with those emotions, and this is the way that can really help us, is to take those emotions as a learning experience so that I can begin to transform myself, so that I can move on and I can help the other person to move on as well. Now, this is really taking negative emotions and doing something constructive with them. And I'll just tell you a couple of stories. I remember somebody phoning me, and I'd been in a meeting and I'd expressed something, and I knew that one particular person may not take it very well, but somehow I felt, sometimes things need to be said. And so when I got back to my desk, there was immediately a voicemail from that person. Well, why did you say this? And, all this sort of, anger, really. So I listened to the voicemail. I put the phone down. Then I phoned the person immediately, because I also know when you let these things fester, that they get bigger in your mind and they get bigger in the other person's mind. So I phoned the person immediately and I just said, I got your voice message. And then again, that person repeated all the same thing. So I just listened. And I had decided beforehand that I wasn't going to try and prove myself. I was just going to listen. And I was not going to buy into the negative emotion. So when I just said, thank you very much, I put the phone down. And then I was very determined not to allow my mind to go back to it. And that night, the only thing I did was to say, okay, what could I learn from that situation, that episode? And I thought, well, if something needed to be said and I knew this person would be uncomfortable, I should have talked to that person beforehand and given that respect. Or maybe said it with more humility, I don't know. But I knew that I should have prepared, because I knew it would be a reaction. So that was my learning, and I never thought about it after. And the result of that, the next day we're in the office together, it's like nothing had happened. I was very happy. Otherwise, something happens, you feel a tension in the relationship, and then that leads to other stresses and strains. So I took, of course, when I heard the voice message, I felt a little bit hurt inside, but I took that and I shifted it. I said, no, this emotion is not useful to me or to that person. So let me shift it around. And of course, the key ingredient that comes in shifting things around is love and appreciation. And so I wanted to remember to appreciate that person for all the good they do, which is amazing, and love them for that. And that helped me a lot. So that's one example. That's how we can try to turn things around. But the very important thing to really get to the root of this and to really be empowered to deal with our emotions, we really need a deeper level of self-awareness. And this is where spiritual teachings, meditation comes in. And the first lesson that I learned, and many of you have learned when coming to the Brahma Kumaris Raj Yoga, you've learned, who am I? I'm not a physical being. I'm not the costume you see in front of you. Yes, it's a real thing. And I have so many labels because of that, whether it's my culture, skin color, whatever. So many labels. Background, gender, of course. But actually, they're not me. I am the being within. I am a soul. That's who I am, a being of light. And we say a tiny point of light situated here in the center of the forehead. And when I begin to contemplate on that idea, it begins to become a different form of self-awareness. So instead of just the self-awareness of the body and all the roles I play, there's the self-awareness of something deeper within. I am a soul. I use the costume of my body. And when I go deep beneath the surface, and this is what meditation does for us, and we will practice at the end of this talk, when I go deep beneath the surface, I find my original qualities, which are my eternal gifts. And they are peace, they are love, they are wisdom or truth, or let's say truth, which gets expressed as wisdom. They are happiness. And all this gives us inner power. And this is where the key comes. And when I develop this self-awareness, there are 3 steps actually. And we had this in our teachings very recently. First is to understand. And mostly we can intellectually understand this. The consciousness is separate from the physical. This is my body. We say my body. Who's owning the body? I, the being, I, the soul. So I can understand it. I am a being, a soul, because all consciousness, you know, when you think of memories, ideas, feelings, thoughts, these are not physical things. They're part of the non-physical consciousness. So I begin to understand that. The consciousness is non-physical, and that is me. All my personality is in that. And that brings me a kind of happiness inside, because it's like a relief to know that I don't have to be anything other than myself. I don't have to be a woman and all the expectations that go with that, or a man, or whatever, my gender. I don't have to be, you know, British or Indian or Kenyan or whatever, Chinese. I don't have to be that. Yes, that's my culture and that will inform my behavior, but I don't have to be that. I don't have to be my profession. So I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be myself. And so that happiness of the relief of being myself, a soul that has love, has peace, has truth, has happiness. So this is a great thing. When I first heard this, excuse me, a little water in here. This was a great happiness when I first heard this. I am that being. But then the next step is to totally accept it. And when you really accept it, which means you believe it, This brings you power. You are then able to act according to that awareness. You are then able to act according to the qualities that you have deep within, rather than to the reactions. So the external stimuli are no longer ruling you and dictating your reactions, but it is your inner qualities that are ruling, but these are very benevolent rulers. It means that they give me the power to choose my response in life. And they give me a different perspective. And so when I'm dealing with negative situations, negative emotions that others throw at me, I now have a choice. Am I just going to stay on the surface and do the same as they did to me? You're just a puppet then. They're writing you a script. They expect you to get angry in return. So you're very obliging. Are we such puppets? Don't we have any other strength inside? So I begin to shift things. I begin to say, well, if that negativity comes to me, what if I choose to respond with love? What if I choose to respond with peace? It's a very different dynamic. I remember in one of our very early seminars for prison staff, in fact, I think the very first one, we had someone who was a prison teacher doing a workshop. And she explained how she worked with the young offenders, young boys, and very often she would be alone in the classroom with them. And she had a new group. She was telling us the story. And at first she wanted to just, win their cooperation. So they would do some rapping, things they enjoyed. And then by the third lesson, she thought, well, now I really have to do something a bit different. So this time she told them, I haven't brought the tape recorder in the room. I will bring it in after the break. But today I want us to do something. I want us to learn some new things, do something different. And of course it's, we want to rap, we want to rap. But one boy came up to her and he was quite tall and he said, Miss, we want to rap. And he held his fist over her head like that. Now, she's on her own with all these boys and one boy is getting aggressive. And she said, you know how in a split second things go through your mind? She said she was actually too small to hit the panic button. She's quite small and it was quite high on the wall, which is a bit not very useful. But she said, I couldn't hit that panic button. She said the next thought came, is his fist moving? Then she said, no, his fist is static. He just held it like that. So then she looked at him and said, Robert, whatever his name was, what are you doing? What do you expect me to feel? Do you expect me to feel scared? And he looked at her with this fist and he said, oh, you don't need to be scared of me, miss. And he put his hand down and went and sat down. And this is a classic example where she approached something without fear and with love and with kindness and with respect. So that boy's aggression just abated. And, there's so many situations we get into where we immediately want to prove ourselves to be right. Why? Our relationships are more important. And don't we want to keep our relationships good in the long term? But I can only do this when I have this deeper self-awareness. And I can draw on these qualities. I accept these qualities. I accept myself for who I really am. And then they begin to become part of my life. So that's the third step of using them and putting them into practice. And then there's even greater happiness and wisdom in life. So how important self-awareness is. And many people, it's almost as if they're asleep, I don't know, not aware of themselves. But this is where we need to wake up, don't we? We really do. And then, of course, dealing with those very deep emotions that are buried. Practicing this kind of self-awareness can very often help to take the power away from those deep-seated emotions. This is what I have found personally. I need to understand that they are there. I need to understand that they've been triggered by something that happened, whenever it was. But I also understand and I accept that my original qualities are actually much more powerful than that. And so let me use my original qualities. And as I use them more and more, I become more and more powerful in them. And, you know, some of you have met our elder sisters. We call them the daddies. Many of them have passed on now. Well, in fact, all but one has. Imagine. Many of you met Sister Genty, or saw her last week, or have met her before. Now tell me there's one thing in them. They have the power of presence. Am I right? That's because they have a lot of emotional intelligence. They don't allow negative emotions to rule them. And they're continuously in that self-awareness of their true self, their true spiritual self. And so they bring a presence with them, a presence that makes you feel good. And without anything else, uplifts you so that your thoughts become more positive. And I know with our elder sister, Daddy Janki, who passed on last year at 104, and we so often refer to her. And she was resident in the UK for over 40 years, then went back to India as head of the organization. And I know sometimes I would go to her with, I'd have several questions to ask. And I go in front of her, and her presence was just so beautiful and so powerful. And first she would just sit with me, and I'd feel that presence. And then she'd say, okay, what do you want to ask? And everything gone out of my head. And so then I learned, if I really want to ask something, I must write it down and then come, so that I'm aware, I can remember what I need the answers for. But her presence was amazing. And there's one story I love to relate. She was somewhere and she was her usual, very vivacious self speaking. And one lady was sitting in the corner of the room and obviously very, very unhappy. And eventually she burst out and she said to Daddy, "What right have you to be so happy when I'm so miserable?" Literally. And Daddy paused. And with a lot of love, she said to her, "Well, if I become miserable as well, who would there be to bring you happiness?" And that just opened that lady's eyes, and things began to transform from then. And so Daddy, using the power of self-awareness, and she decided not to buy into the person's negativity. And this is the key thing. somebody is negative, we buy into it. Either we feel we are responsible, but can I really be responsible for someone else's feelings? Just as, when somebody triggers a hurt in me and I blame them, you did this to me, why did you do this? Actually, they did whatever they did, but the hurt was in me and the reaction was in me. So the reality is that I'm responsible, not them. Maybe, yes, things could have been done better, but my reactions. Then how can I learn? How can I help the other person to learn? Or somebody's unhappy. At that moment, Daddy could have become very sympathetic and said, oh, I'm really sorry. What's the matter? Well, that lady would have gone into more of her sorrows. We can be rather empathetic. I do feel there's a difference. Empathetic, we feel for the other, but we really want to uplift them. It's a sympathy, of course, but another level of uplifting that person. And so often I have people come to meet me who are not in a very happy situation. And often I find just to listen in an empathetic way is all that is needed. And then they themselves understand the solutions that they have to adopt. And if I'm in a difficult physical situation, okay, first I have to deal with my emotions. And if I'm able to be more constructive in my thinking and my feeling, I will find solutions. I will use my inner wisdom to find solutions even to those what seem to be intractable, difficult physical situation that I'm in. Now, this is very interesting, and many, many people have experienced it. They thought this could never change, but because they changed within, the situation began to change, opportunities opened up. It really helps us, this self-awareness, to become the master of our own destiny. Very important. And I mentioned that before, that when I'm empowering those qualities and empowering myself, I do feel, and this is what Raj Yoga means, Raja Yoga, the connection with the highest, the connection with God, with the divine, is so crucial in this, because God never buys into our unhappiness, but God is always giving us what we need. Love, purity, happiness, wisdom. God is giving, 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 giving. And can I remove the barriers so that I can take from God what it is that I need? And when you feel that power, that strength coming to you, it really gives you a lot of courage. Courage to face situations you perhaps thought you just couldn't face before. Courage to take a new step in your life. Courage to do what you really feel God wants for you. And sometimes we need to make choices that may go against what the rest of society is saying. It's okay. Sometimes I may need to do that, but I must be right in that. I must follow my inner feelings. Sometimes my family, my peer group, whatever, are pushing one way. I'm not comfortable. Let me take time out to be in that self-awareness, because that self-awareness is the route to the door to my connection with the divine. Let me sit in that divine presence. Let me take God's love, not to sit and think about the problem. That's a key. You'll only come out with more problems. But to sit and think about your own self-awareness, come into that awareness, connect, be in that presence, take that love, and then come back to the situation. And then you'll know what is right, and you will have the courage to follow that. It's very practical. And sometimes people are not ready to hear that. Okay, you may have to say, let's wait. But if something is a true, right, pure thought, it will happen, whether it's now or a little bit later. But I'm comfortable in knowing that I have listened to my conscience. I have listened to my feelings within, and I've taken that power from God so that I have the courage to do that, and I can continue to do that. Imagine if in life more of us were able to act in this way. I think that there are many crises that the world is going through that may be overturned. I can just think about the crisis of the environment, and people are fearful. But somehow the decisions are not being taken where they need to be taken to reverse this, or at least to mitigate against it. And what's the reason? It's greed, it's ego, it's power, being power hungry, all those reasons, because people are not listening to their conscience. People are not self-aware. And okay, my little way, but my little way impacts the whole. I'm always aware of that. We have a slogan, as I change, the world changes. It's so important that we play our part in whatever way we can. And then, when you do that, people come to respect you. And you don't ask for the respect, but it naturally comes to you because people can sense that you are following your conscience, and they can sense those original qualities from you as you act and move in life. And so let us practice this, and practice this deeply so that it really becomes the transformative engine of our life. It's not just a practice, it actually transforms us, and it actually helps to transform the community, the society, and the world around us. So now let us have a few minutes of meditation together. I take time to go within, and I first see my mind. There are many waves on the surface. Sometimes happiness, sometimes sorrow, up and down. The tide goes in, the tide goes out. But we know that if we dive deep into the bottom of the ocean, there is stillness, there is peace. So I remind myself that deep beneath those layers of emotions are the pure feelings of my original state of being. I am a being of light. I am consciousness, awareness. I inhabit my body, my costume. But now I go deeply into the awareness of I, the being, I, the soul. As I touch those deep inner qualities, I begin to feel them. I experience them as part of me. I am a being of peace. This is a peace that no one can disturb. It is part of me. I had just forgotten. I am a being of love. Love is such an essential quality of the being. I am, at my heart, a loving being. A love that is, that expects nothing, but only gives. And within, I have truth. The truth of who I am. The truth of my conscience. And the truth of my relationship with God. God is light, a being of light. I, the soul, the being, am light. And with a thought, the light connects with the light. And I begin to feel the power of God's love, the comfort of God's peace, the courage that God's truth gives me. The more deeply I connect, the more I'm filled with all these divine qualities. And I know that this is what can guide me in my life. With God's presence and my own self-awareness, I'm able to deal with the challenges that come, to remain in a state of peace, of love, of wisdom. And so I return to the awareness of my body and the room and my surroundings. Having been on a beautiful journey, but I bring with me many treasures. Om Shanti, I am peace. So, I hope you enjoyed the journey, and I would encourage you to make that journey as often as you can, in the mornings especially, to meditate, to connect, in the evenings, to wrap up the day and see all the things that you've learned. In this way, we can continue to transform those negative emotions and make it into a good energy that really propels us forward in life. And the beautiful thing is that when we do this, and it's really coming from within, others are able to benefit too. I don't want to do this at the expense of others. I want everyone to come with me. And that's the joy of being together as one human family.